His hands were shaking more than mine, which, considering I was the one holding the needle, was saying something. It was a late Tuesday, the kind of late where the whole world goes quiet except for the hum of a refrigerator and the occasional creak of an old house settling into itself. I was doing a house call, which sounds more glamorous than it is. It was my neighbor's uncle, visiting from out of town, who'd let his blood pressure medication run out 3 days prior and was now sitting at a kitchen table looking like a man who'd made peace with his choices but wasn't entirely happy about them. His name was Gerald, 70-something, silver hair, the kind of posture that told you he'd spent decades behind a desk making decisions. He had reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, even though there was nothing to read. I think he just liked having them there. A comfort object. We all have one. "I don't do well with needles," he said, before I'd even opened my bag. I didn't look up. I was unwrapping my kit, laying things out in order the way I always do. Not because it's strictly required, but because the sound of things being placed deliberately, one by one, has a way of calming people. There's a rhythm to preparation. Patients hear it and something in them starts to slow down. "Nobody does," I said. "That's not actually a personality trait, that's just being human." He laughed, a little surprised. I think he expected me to say, "Oh, it won't hurt a bit." I never say that. It's a lie, and people can always tell. His niece, my actual neighbor, Priya, who'd called me in a mild panic around 9 in the evening, was hovering near the doorway with her arms crossed, doing that thing people do when they're worried but trying not to show it. I gave her a small nod that meant, "He's fine, you can breathe." She exhaled. She didn't even notice she did it. Gerald needed an intramuscular injection. His doctor had called in a prescription for a medication that needed to be administered that way rather than orally, given how long he'd gone without it and the current state of his blood pressure. I'd confirmed everything with his physician before driving over. That's not optional, by the way. Even when someone's family is standing right there, even when it seems obvious, you confirm. You always confirm. A phone call takes 2 minutes. Assumptions can take much longer to undo. I asked Gerald to sit sideways in the chair and roll up his sleeve. He hesitated. "Actually," I said, "for this one, I'd prefer your outer thigh, if that's all right with you. It's a larger muscle, easier to work with, and honestly, more comfortable for you." He blinked. "The thigh?" "The vastus lateralis," I said, because sometimes giving something its proper name makes it feel less strange. "The outer part. It's one of the safest sites for this kind of injection. Good blood supply, away from major nerves." He considered this with the gravity of a man being asked to sign a treaty. "All right," he said finally. "You're the professional." I am. But I also find that reminding people of that too forcefully makes them tense up. So I said it lightly, almost like a joke, and he relaxed another degree. He pulled up the leg of his slacks. He was wearing actual slacks at 10 in the evening in his niece's kitchen, which I respected enormously, and I pulled on my gloves. There's something I've always liked about that moment. The snap of latex, or nitrile if you're like me and switched years ago. It marks a kind of transition. Before the gloves, you're just a person in a room. After them, you're doing something that matters. I clean the site with an alcohol swab in a small outward spiral, not back and forth, which can reintroduce bacteria, but outward, letting it dry completely before I did anything else. People rush that step. You shouldn't. "Cold?" he said when the swab touched his skin. "It'll warm up in a second." I let it dry. That's not impatience on my part. It's that wet alcohol on the skin can sting when the needle goes in, and there's no reason to add unnecessary sensation to a moment that already has plenty. I drew up the medication, checked it twice, the label, the dose, the expiration, the clarity of the solution. Gerald was watching me with those sharp eyes of his, the kind that have seen enough of life to know when someone knows what they're doing and when they're performing knowing. I wasn't performing. "Are you going to count to 3?" he asked. "No," I said. "Counting to 3 makes people brace on 2. I'll just go." He opened his mouth to respond to that, and that's exactly when I went. The needle was in before he finished his thought. The angle for an intramuscular injection into the thigh is 90 degrees, straight in, perpendicular to the skin. You go in with confidence, not hesitation. Hesitation is what makes it hurt. You pull back the plunger slightly to confirm you're not in a blood vessel. No flash of blood, which is what you want. And then you depress slowly, steadily, not fast. The medication needs time to disperse into the muscle tissue without causing that deep ache that makes patients never want to come back. I counted in my head. 1 slow breath. Then I withdrew the needle at the same angle it went in, pressed a clean cotton ball gently to the site, and held it there for a moment. Gerald looked at his leg, then at me. Then at his leg again. "That was it?" "That was it." Huh. He seemed almost disappointed, like he'd been gearing up for something and the something never arrived. "My last nurse counted to 3. Did it help?" A pause. "No." "Yeah," I said. "It doesn't." I massaged the site very gently. Just a few small circles with the cotton ball, which helps distribute the medication and reduces the chance of localized soreness the next morning. Not everyone does this step. I always do. Priya appeared with a glass of water, which she handed to her uncle with the focused care of someone who needed to feel useful. He took it. They looked at each other with the particular warmth of family that doesn't always say what it means. I started packing up my things. "His blood pressure was elevated when I checked it earlier," I told Priya, keeping my voice even and informational. "Not in crisis territory, but not where we want it. Make sure he takes his oral medication tomorrow morning with food, not on an empty stomach, because it can cause dizziness, especially when he stands up. And if he feels lightheaded at any point, sit him down. Don't let him push through it. Dizziness from blood pressure changes is one of those things that people try to walk off and shouldn't." She nodded, committing it to memory the way worried people do. "And the fever he had this afternoon?" she asked. I'd forgotten she'd mentioned that on the phone. "If it comes back tonight and goes above 103, call his doctor. A low-grade fever in someone his age who's been physically stressed, traveling, medication lapse, isn't unusual. But above 103, or if he develops chills that won't stop, or confusion, that's when you stop waiting and call. Don't try to manage that at home." Gerald, who had been listening to all of this with the expression of a man who does not enjoy being discussed in the third person, said, "I'm right here." "I know," I said. "I'm telling her because she's the one who'll be awake at 2 a.m. worrying. You'll be asleep." He smiled at that. It was a good smile, actually, the kind that lives in the corners of the eyes. I snapped my bag shut. Priya walked me to the door, and at the threshold she grabbed my hand with both of hers, the way people do when they don't have the right words. I squeezed back. I know what that means. It means thank you, and I was scared, and I'm glad you came all at once, and sometimes that's everything. Outside, the air had that cool, slightly damp quality that late evenings get in early fall. I stood on the porch for a moment before walking to my car, not because I needed to, just because sometimes it's worth pausing between one world and the next. Gerald's light was still on in the kitchen. I could see a silhouette through the curtain,